Good evening and welcome to tonight's City of Burnside Council meeting on June the 17th, 2025. Please stand if you are able and remain silent during the acknowledgements. We acknowledge that the land we meet on today is the traditional land of the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the original custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important to the Kaurna people today, and we welcome other First Nations people to our meeting. On behalf of the City of Burnside, I gratefully acknowledge and pay respect to all those who have sacrificed their lives for this country and its people. We also consider in our thoughts all those who today are being affected by war around the globe, and especially those in Ukraine and the Middle East, with the added hostility and harm that's going on at the moment. We seek guidance in our debate as we make decisions that will impact on the lives of all who reside, study, work in or visit the City of Burnside. Grant us wisdom as we serve our community. Please be seated. As you know, we have a very full agenda tonight with items that must be attended tonight being 11.1 through to 11.4 and the confidential items 15.1 and 15.2. So make your questions clear and succinct. Wait until I call you to speak according to the cue on my screen. Turn off your microphone when you finish speaking, and please show respect for the speaker by listening to what is being said and refrain from talking over them. That applies, of course, to those people in the gallery as well. I also just want to remind you of our behaviour standards with regard to your manner of debate. Absences. We have no absences this evening. And I'll just remind you when it comes to declaration of interest, it's done just before the item begins debate. Confirmation of minutes, I seek a mover. Councillor Turnbull, you're moving. Councillor Henschke, you're seconding. All those in favour? Against? Carried. No, we have no adjourned business, and we have one question, a public question time from Mr. Greg Cates. If you'd like to come forward, Mr. Cates, please, to the microphone. And once you've sat down, just press the speaker on there so the red light comes on. Thank you.
Go ahead. Okay. My name's Greg Cates. I'm from Hazelwood Park. Honoured to ask, are the council aware that of the 207 responses in the draft budget, 105 of them supporting the skate park, 105 of them are virtually identical, consisting of the statement, I support a skate or wheel park, and appear to come from children. Is it acceptable that these responses, which have clearly been coached, should be all included? Will council give them equal consideration to those responses against those who put actual arguments forward on this issue? What about the fact that none of these statements specifically address the question of a feasibility study on a skate park at Linden Avenue Reserve, the actual proposal in the budget?
Excuse me, you've had your question. In fact, you've had about three.
Well,
you're allowed one question.
It's a compound question.
Sorry,
that relates
you are allowed
to
one
the
question.
Same issue.
We will answer, and it's not a motion, right? You are asking one question, and that's the rules. I'm following the rules, gallery. Now, would you like to answer the question, please?
Thank you, Mr. Cates, for your question, and I know you've sort of sent queries in through to administration as well. With reference to your question, all the survey recipients and what we've received through our engagement process are all valid, and they align with our legislative and policy requirements. And so, look, everything that comes through, we check on our property database, and we align surnames with the recipients, and we check that off. If there are multiple and duplicates, we take them out. However, any comment that's received that's aligned to an address on our property base and a name is considered valid and is counted. Thank you.
My question was more to the council in terms of how will they
Excuse
guard
me,
them.
That's not the way the council public question time operates. You've had your question, you've had an answer, Now we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is deputations. Presentations, deputations. And I ask Mr. Henry Petsanek to come forward, please.
Good evening. My name is Henry Pekanek from the Penfold Estate. Mayor Monceau, councillors and staff, thank you for your valuable time to receive this deputation from the residents of Penfold Estate in the city of Burnside. We request that you consider extending your consultation process with us on the proposed changes to the street lighting. This request is before the removal of the existing heritage street lighting. By preserving a partnership approach, together we should conserve one of the historic qualities that are uniquely Burnside, and by working together we aim to perhaps reduce cost. What is the problem? The special Penfold Estate lighting has not been maintained, and we all want to change over to more environmentally efficient lighting. Why, we ask, haven't these goals already been achieved? Obviously, without the answers, we want to have further consultation to find out why, but we have heard reference to some issues. We've heard reference to corrosion, and very importantly, we've heard reference to the position of the South Australian Power Networks, called SAPN. I'll attend to that in a little bit more detail. However, the following is not meant to be a full discourse on the concerns. We feel that the goals of having better street lighting and retaining our heritage might have been missed out because street lighting appears to be outsourced to the South Australian Power Networks, again, SAPN. We've been told that council must provide an option prescribed inter alia by SAPN. SAPN is going to be dictating the changes to our heritage lighting. Now, in the initial consultation, which served up two choices going forward, they appear to come right out of the playbook of SAPN. We believe that we have an opportunity to protect our special lighting rather than accessing to some powers outside of even Australia. Can we achieve environmental friendly lighting and retain the character in this distinctive area in a less disruptive way? I don't have the answers here, but we believe that further consultation is likely to result in a win-win, and it could be cheaper. Now, let there be no doubt as to the strength of the opposition to the proposed new street lighting. We respectfully ask Council to consider the following information. On personal visits, more than 80% of those visited were not happy with the planned replacement of the lighting. More than 80%, I said more like 90. Now I've got 81 signatures from 59 properties. This is in stark contrast to the anecdotal information we received that only 5% of the residents objected to SAPN's proposal. Could it be that being fed in a letterbox drop with 2 check boxes from SAPN, residents just chose the lesser of two evils? It's possibly a result of the type of letterbox consultation. Many residents have felt that their concerns are not met. Now, the strategic vision of Burnside Council is to build on identifying and preserving those qualities that are uniquely Burnside. We wonder whether you can have a retrofit on the lights or whether we can see more comparable street lighting that exists in nearby suburbs and what a broader search might reveal. We have encumbrances upon us which are severe and we abide by them. We think council should work with us to retain the character and improve this current proposal to repair the street lighting. Special thanks I must give to Councillor Kerry Hallett, and particularly some lengthy conversations with Councillor Joe Harvey, most useful. I have to thank you again for your time this evening.
Thank you very much for coming in. If you'd just like to wait there in case there's anyone who wishes to ask a question, and I see one from Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mr Peckenake, for coming along tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Davey.
To talk to us about your concerns.
Yes.
I'm interested in the encumbrances that you have,
Yes.
the special
Yes, thank you.
provisions you have. If you could explain those to
Well,
us,
some of
please.
those, Councillor Davey, include the following. We are not allowed to have a fence in the front of the properties. The heritage or the view has open street view with unobstructed. We have no power lines above us in the area. Fences are to be brush or masonry, not galvanised iron. I will say that council has the power to override some of these things, but these encumbrances include constraints on subdivision. You can't just go plonking several houses on your block. You're constrained to minimise the visual impact from adjoining properties. You're not supposed to upset your neighbours with what you're putting in your yard. You're not allowed to have aerials. Building height above 8.65 metres is disallowed. And generally, the building scheme of development must blend with the surroundings that exist now. They're some of the points that we had to sign, and we all have to sign and abide by them in becoming a resident of Penfold Estate.
Thanks. May I have a follow-up question there? I just have a couple of other things. How long have the encumbrances have been in place? And also, is it not possible, because I think those street lamps look beautiful,
Yes.
and I think they're in part looking, you know, compliance with the heritage and what's the word? Well, they look like they fit in with the heritage, of the area. Is it not possible to put LED lighting?
Well,
globes
one
in
of
there?
excellent question, Councillor Davey. I would say that 2/3 or more of the residents that I spoke to asked the question why we can't retrofit the lamps that are there and save the council money. That was by far the biggest question that I got from any door knock that I had.
Thank you. Next person is Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Henry, for coming in this evening and presenting us with this wonderful presentation that you've gone to a lot of trouble to do. I'm interested to know, how long did it take you to get 81 signatures on the petition?
Well, it took me 3 days to get about 77 signatures, and I've had a couple of them dribbling in afterwards. I had almost no response from letterbox dropping. I had almost no response from giving the pamphlet to children to give to parents. Almost all responses, both positive and the negative ones, were face-to-face.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you. I just have another question. What actions can council put in place to satisfy residents' concerns?
Well, I think we first of all want to understand, if we're to lose our heritage lighting, we want to know why we have to lose it and how much money is being spent because Sappan wants us to rip out all the lights and put in new poles. We would be amazed if that path, in the long run, even with maintenance, is a better option. We can understand that heritage lights might be a little bit more difficult to change, but I would think the initial capital cost of a retrofit might well be sufficiently less than replacing all the poles to tolerate slightly higher operating costs in the future.
Thank you very much for coming in this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, Mr.
Peckenake.
May I call you Henry?
Peckenake's fine. Thank you,
Thank you,
Councillor
Henry.
Jennings.
Can they be retrofitted with LED energy efficient light bulbs? I apologise, I found out about this on Thursday and I simply haven't been able to get up. And because I would have turned up there and climbed up the pole and just had a look, or just investigated some more. This just seems like another example of SA Power Networks gold plating The network. Sorry to be aggressive, they're not.
Yeah, well, Councillor Jennings, unfortunately I can't come here this evening with all the answers.
No.
However,
Just
I would have to share with you that I have exactly the same question you have, which is why can't we retrofit? The lanterns are fairly big. Why can't we retrofit a energy efficient LED light in most of the lamps? That's the opening position of people. And if there's a slightly higher operating cost in dealing with a glass one type of lamp than the other, I think in the overall scheme of things, it would be marginal compared to putting in the Sapin standard. You know, we're being served up an unpleasant sandwich and a very unpleasant sandwich. I think we can do better.
Thank you very much. I might follow up later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jennings.
Sorry, Councillor Wilkin.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for coming in, Henry. Has anybody got their electrician out to just have a look at these light poles and to see what is feasible, rather than just taking on board the advice you've been told?
Yeah, well, Councillor Wilkins, I haven't bellied up to the bar to pay for an electrician to do that as yet. If it has to be that some of the residents put a kitty together, you know, to get some electric solutions in there and have a look, we might. It's good if we can work together though and not come up with our person's opinion versus somebody else. It would be really great if there was a working team and the working team could select an independent assessment of the possibility of a retrofit, and then both sides are more likely to respect the opinion of the joint chosen electrical consultant, I would imagine.
Yes, I would agree with you. And I would imagine that all residents would want to keep the actual style of post and all the appropriate fittings that go with a heritage lamp, like the ones up in the main street of Hindor,
Okay.
both sides, end to end, rather than just a green pole with something stuck on top. Thank you for coming in and explaining to us.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you for coming. Sorry, I'm a bit confused.
Yes, sir.
Is Sapin changing the polls or is council changing the polls?
Okay, Councillor Jones, again, my understanding of it is that Sapin has a play sheet, and I'm concerned that Sapin is influencing the Burnside Council's operation division to go with Sapin's playbook. Whereas we have special lights in our area and we don't want to be in Sapin's playbook and be limited by the choices of Sapin. Again, I'm ignorant about why it does that, but when we received, and I won't mention the person's name, but when we received in an email, we were told that you virtually have to play out of Sapin's playbook. You had two choices and these are them, and they're not good sandwiches.
Right. But it is council that will...
I believe that's the case.
So if
But
council
it's
wants
outsourcing
to stick two
it.
fingers up to Sapin, it's council's decision.
Let me admit, I better understand your question quite carefully.
Maybe you should just be careful with the language you use, Mr Jones.
If council wants to push back on Sapin, it's for council to do it. That's what you're suggesting.
I would believe that Sapin is a contractor at the behest of Burnside Council.
Right.
But this is a rather uneven, one-sided affair where Sapin has so much power in the state that instead of them doing what we want to do, I think we've got a situation where Sapin is telling us what we're going to do.
Yeah.
That's my understanding of the situation.
All right.
I can't promise that's the case.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
And you may have that chance to answer that question when we get to the petitions. All right. So now we'll move on to petitions item 10.4, page 37. There are two petitions there. We need to resolve them both one at a time. So I need a motion to accept the petition on the resident parking on Glyde Street, Beulah Park, first of all, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll speak to this. There is an alternate recommendation coming up. I'll read it out to you while it's coming up on the screen. The Council receives report number 2025376, the Residents' Petition, Protection of Resident Parking along Glard Street, Beulah Park, between Portrush Road and Salop Street, requesting Council introduce parking restrictions and resident parking permits in Glard Street, Beulah Park, between Portrush Road and Salop Street. 1, to ensure that the residents are able to park as near as possible to their homes on Glard Street, Beulah Park. 2, to ensure that emergency vehicles and rubbish collection trucks are able to access narrow Glard Street for resident safety and amenity. And B, receives a report by October 2025 that addresses the petition's requests, outlines options for change implementation while identifying potential impacts on traffic and parking in adjacent streets. So in speaking to this, the residents along Glard Street have increasingly and for some time experienced high volumes of traffic, cut-through traffic. But the biggest problem for the residents in this really inner suburban aspect of Beulah Park is the inability to park near their homes. And that means anywhere near. They don't expect to just be able to park outside. They're mostly single-fronted cottages. Some have rear lane access. But they're particularly concerned that during the day, the parking that comes from the parade and the increasing cafes and shops along the parade, and the parking that has been pushed back because all the other surrounding streets, including Salop Street, now have parking restrictions. So they find that they're the last remaining street to have any controls on the parking. They're very concerned about being able to receive visitors to their home care services, because some of them need these, and tradespeople, and also very concerned about their rubbish collection, that the east-west garbage collection isn't able to get along Glard Street often. They're also receiving side swipes to their cars. A lot of people are losing mirrors. So they're really having some problems with people parking across from each other in a narrow street, plus the volumes of parking. And they're requesting that we do an assessment and look at what is provided in many other areas in these tight streets, designated resident parking and perhaps less parking in the streets. It's a complex problem. The staff are familiar with it, but I think their biggest worry is that the emergency vehicles won't be able to get through if they need an ambulance or the police. I think we've recently had, as part of our master planning process, a traffic management plan done of the area, and I think they did identify Glard Street. I'm happy to be corrected, but they identified Glard Street as being a particularly challenging area in this regard. So hopefully you'll support this. Thank you.
Seek a seconder. Councillor Wilkins.
Yes, I'm very happy to support this motion from Councillor Davey, because guess what? It's what we've experienced in Eastwood over the years, and everybody actually treasures the residential parking permits in our narrow streets for all the reasons that Councillor Davey has just illuminated. And so I'm very happy to support this, because it's happening on the other side of the city as well. And residential parking and the fabulous rangers actually patrolling the streets have actually reduced some anxiety for residents, particularly in John Street, Main Street and Elizabeth Street. So I'm happy to support this.
Councillor Davey, do you wish to sum up?
No, I'm happy to put the motion. Thank you, Mayor.
I'll put the motion then. All those in favour? Against? Motion's carried. Now we need the second motion, which is 10.4.2, page 38, is the petition relating to the proposed replacement street lighting in Penfold Estate. Councillor Davey, do you have an alternate motion, or are you moving to accept the petition?
Councillor Harvey's got it.
Sorry, did I say... I apologise. Councillor Harvey, not Councillor Davey. Apologies.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I just move the petition be received extending the consultation of the proposed replacement street lighting in Penfold Estate, and I hope you will support this heritage lighting so it can continue to shine brightly on beautiful Penfold Estate.
And Councillor Hallett, you're seconding. Do you wish to speak? No. Right. Councillor Jones, you wish to ask a question now? Yes.
CEO, can I please ask, whose decision is it and who pays for the replacement lighting, if indeed they're beyond repair?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, I'll ask Barry to answer that one.
Thank you. I can confirm that it's a council project, so it's not at the direction of SAPN themselves. We do have to ensure that we have reliable, long-term and compliant lighting solution on site, and it has to be in line with SA Power Networks technical standards and the relevant Australian standards as well as council's policy. But this is a whole project replacement for council and directed through the relevant guidelines and legislation. I will take an opportunity to say this project is on hold, council. Okay, so I sent you all an email on Friday. Following the consultation process, looking into two different options for lights that are required to be upgraded. We presented two different options for council. One was the standard one in line with council's policy. The other one was a more sympathetic aesthetic light that we put out to the community. That's what we that's what we had the feedback on, and the majority of the respondents at that time selected option 2, which was the more aesthetic choice, more in line with the historic lighting in place. However, at that time, there were also a number of residents who were upset with either choice, and at that stage advised that we were going to receive a petition. At that time, we said we would put on hold this project until we have a chance to receive that petition. Now we've received the petition, we've advised the residents that we will work with them and the ward councillors to look at what options are there, to correct some of the misinformation that's out there as well, to clearly explain why this is important, and then to look at the options available. Now, retrofitting may be possible, however, there's ageing infrastructure in place there. We need to ensure it's compliant with current technology, and it may actually be more expensive to do that, but that's something that we'll need to get further advice on from the relevant experts, and also look at the budget considerations of that.
Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got two questions, if I may.
I just had to, we have someone walked in who's obviously not in the right place, can't find us, so I had to get someone to go and get them to go, give them some directions. So now, Councillor Davies.
I've got two questions, if I may. One is, how old is this lighting? And two, I've got exact or very similar lighting in my old cottage at Leabrook, and I got my electrician to just upgrade it with an LED light. I did a bit of improvement to it and had it painted and repaired and everything. Is that not possible to actually upgrade the existing? And if not, why not? Thank you.
Through the Mayor, the lighting was installed by the estate developer in the mid-1980s. It's reached the end of its serviceable life, and there's been frequent faults reported. We have 75 to 80 lights in this location. Not only do the luminaires need to be replaced, there's also significant underground cabling that's also required to bring it up to the current standards. So it's not as simple as just replacing one light. However, all that being said, more than happy to take advice from relevant consultants to seek a suitable resolution.
Councillor Cornish.
Just a question in regards to, yes, I certainly remember the 1980s. I used to run amok around here as a child before a lot of the houses were actually built, because friends actually lived in there and spent a lot of time in this estate as a child. So I suppose with a lot of developments that get handed over to council after someone does a property development like that, and this is pre-development plan, so I'd assume that's why there are so many encumbrances on so many of the properties up there, because the state didn't have an actual plan about development. In terms of the standards, were there any standards at the time for street lighting and streets and stuff like that when developers did these to hand over to councils to take over? Like, I can understand the importance of keeping the amenity that people bought into, if that makes sense. Do you know of any?
Through the Mayor, not that I'm aware of. There would have been relevant requirements at the time. What they were, I would have to take on notice, but I can assure you that the current lighting in place wouldn't meet today's relevant standards.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you. So just a follow-up question. Am I right in thinking that the administration will now go and see if they can find a more heritage-looking pole and tell us what the incremental cost compared to what we were proposing at the moment would be? Is that a fair summary?
That's one of the options we'll certainly look at. We'll have to work with the residents who have submitted the petition to truly understand their concerns as well. We'll take the opportunity to explain the options that we have provided, one of them being a more aesthetic pleasing light post, and explain how we've come to that position. If it requires a further budget than is currently allocated to proceed with whatever we land on, that will have to come back to council.
Because as you know, I don't like spending money. But how many poles are we talking about?
I think it's 75, but I'll have to. It's about that number. It's a fair number. And I will say as well, anything that we land on will then have to go back out to the same consultation that we did previously.
Councillor Jenny.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question. There's several of these heritage lampposts around Burnside. Are they all reaching their end of life? And would all things underground be actually SA Power Network's problem, not the City of Burnside's? Thank you.
To your first point, I'll have to take that on notice. There will be several that have already been replaced. There'll be some that are older, some that are newer. I would have to take that on notice, and that would be covered under our asset management planning process. With respect to whose responsibility is, it's a little bit of both. We would have to take charge of the infrastructure required for our streetlight project to be implemented.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one quick question. We haven't put a timeline on the report. Roughly how long is it likely to take before it comes back to council, bearing in mind all the undertakings you've just given us? Thanks.
Through the Mayor, there's no report necessarily coming back to council at this stage. All you're doing just now is receiving the petition. What the administration will do is work with the ward councillors and the residents. If we can still manage this project in line with the approved budget and the approved policy, there'd be no reason to bring it back to council.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you. Just a question. The problem sounds like it's a big problem and the problem needs to be done now, or is it not such a big one? Or we still have to work out how big a problem it is?
Through the Mayor, the lighting is not compliant with current standards. However, there is no actual requirement for council to provide street lighting. Okay, so that's the one thing we have to look at. Mm-hmm. We are increasingly seeing failings across the entire network of those street lights, and I believe 7 to 8% of them have been reported as faulty over the last few years. Yeah. So it's costing us an increasing amount in maintenance to maintain these street lights. That's why it's time for them to be replaced. It doesn't have to happen tomorrow, but it should happen soon.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, do you wish to speak again?
No, just put it to the vote,
Right.
thank you.
Then I shall put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Motion's carried. Now I will move through to the reports, and I'll seek your desire to withdraw them. So the first one is 11.1, Councillor Hallett.
I wanted to move the motion.
No, not yet. We're just, oh, you want to move the motion as it is? Oh, that, could you do that? Please, John.
If somebody wants to withdraw it, they can withdraw it for debate.
Yeah.
But they need to be given the opportunity. So you can't move it right away if somebody else wants to
No,
withdraw it.
I can't allow you to move it if there's somebody who wishes to withdraw it for debate. Okay. So, Councillor Davey, you wish to withdraw it for debate?
Thank you, Mayor.
Future Living Code Amendment. Councillor Davey.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Councillor Henschke.
Debate, please.
Sorry? You wish to withdraw it?
Withdraw, thank you.
Kensington Wama, Kensington Gardens Reserve Club Rooms, lease approval. Councillor Harvey, you wish to withdraw it?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Eastern Health Authority Annual Business Plan and Budget. You happy to move it, Councillor Cornish?
Happy to move, if someone already got it.
Councillor Henschke, you wish to...
Happy to move.
You're happy to move it? Councillor Cornish second it. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Finance end of the month report. I seek a mover. Councillor Cornish, you're happy to move it. Councillor Turnbull, you're happy to second it. All those in favour? Against? Carried. 11.6, Council Member Behaviour Complaint. Councillor Jones.
Withdraw, please.
Mayor's Activity Report. Councillor Harvey, you wish to withdraw it?
Yes, thank you.
Chief Executive Officer's Report. Councillor Davey. All right, we shall go back then to page 40, 11.1, Annual Business Plan and Budget. Councillor Davey, I assume you have an alternate motion.
That's right.
You have submitted it to Councillor Davey, have you?
That's right, thank you. Yes, it's just come up.
Oh, here it is.
I won't read through it all. It essentially means two aspects: removal of the feasibility study from the budget and with other consequent amendments. So I'll speak to it now. The Wheel Park feasibility study at the Linden Avenue Reserve is the most contentious item and issue in this year's budget, as I think we all know. The late inclusion of the feasibility study in the business process is rather ironic, given the City of Burnside is seeking to make savings in our expenditure. And part of this includes reviewing our services to contain our spending. We've made a big effort to do that. Also, after the huge increase in rates of 9.8% last financial year, the community consultation process has not given, we are told that the community consultation process has not given due consideration to the ratepayers who signed and presented a petition to council, which we received a few weeks ago, with a significant number of 833 valid signatures of ratepayers who are opposed to a feasibility study in Linden Avenue Reserve. When council undertook a significant piece of work 6 or 7 years ago to determine sites appropriate for a skate park, we looked at the whole issue. Linden Avenue Reserve was examined and excluded, failing 13 of the 19 criteria deemed necessary for such a fixture. The site is too small and would require closure of Linden Avenue at Devereux Road to make the site larger. There'd be removal of trees and a lot of negativity and negative impact on the residential area and the businesses in the area. I cannot envisage the Department of Transport approving road closure here at Linden Avenue. It's a major suburban street, carries volumes of traffic, there's huge development of homes around it, and it supports and services an area of increasing development. Thank you to the staff for their work developing and refining the 2025-26 budget and financial plans, but I cannot support inclusion of a wasteful and unnecessary feasibility study for a Linden Avenue Reserve skate park, especially when such a strong opposition is recorded against it by the local community. I hope you'll support this motion. Thank you.
I seek a seconder. Councillor Harvey, you wish to speak?
I reserve my right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkins.
Yes, I will support the motion. I particularly do not want to see us spend 40 grand on a feasibility study for a skate park, especially when we have been telling our ratepayers that we're going to pay down debt. This is money that could be put to our long-term debt situation. Secondly, we have other priorities and I think we need to concentrate on those, but particularly paying down debt and considering once we pay down debt we can have a lesser rate per year and therefore we might be able to keep the costs to our ratepayers down regarding rates per quarter, because everybody is stretched re-cost in their own personal home budget. So for this reason, I support the alternative motion and I don't support the 40 grand for the skate park at this time.
If no one else is going to speak, I need to... All right, we have someone now. Councillor Henschke.
A question for the administration. Thank you. Through the Mayor, Council has a project management framework for every project, and my question is, can the administration please explain, clarify that when a project like a feasibility study commences and progresses, that there are stages of expenditure, and will those stages of expenditure mean that it could be, say, a lot less than $40,000? In fact, I understand it's not 40, it's 30, because the little wheel, the rubber wheel, existing children's track is going to be sold if that raises money. But that's my question, that, yeah, in terms of staging of a project, there will be gates where we're not necessarily going to spend the whole allocated budget. So, yeah, if you could just expand on that and clarify. Thank you.
Through the Mayor, that's correct. If this project is approved within the budget, there'll be three separate stages of developing the feasibility study that will be brought back to Council to determine whether or not they proceed at each stage. 40,000 would be the maximum cost that we are anticipating to do the study.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor. Of the 120 responses on the skate park from the community consultation, how many were actually from within the Burnside Council area?
Through the Mayor, I'll have to take that one on notice.
Thank you, and I have another question. If it is so important that Burnside Council produce a skate park, then why are we considering the majority of responses from outside of the Burnside Council area?
Through the Mayor, the consultation engagement report highlights all the valid responses, which I think 285 are all valid, and 207 supported the feasibility study, with 78 respondents against the project or expressed concern. So they're all valid. They're valid according to our policy.
Councillor Dawes.
Yes, I just want to again talk about valuations. And I'm pleased that on page 107, if I can just refer that page to my colleagues, that we have a fairly consistent increase in valuations across all suburbs. I think only one suburb is about 1% above the average of 9.93. So what that means is that the rate of 6.95, the vast majority of our residents will be paying 6.95. In the past, as you might remember last year, we had quite a variation between suburbs. In my case, my rates went up by 20% because we had a 9.8% plus I went up. So this time it's a lot better. I think the first...
9.94.
Yeah, it's 9.93 is the average, but if you look at your suburbs in your wards, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that there hasn't been a major increase on one compared to the other. So that was just my overall comment.
If there's no one else to speak, do you wish to speak now as a seconder, Councillor Harvey?
Yes, thank you. To have elected members in this chamber ignore the voices of 833 residents who signed a petition not supporting the reckless expenditure of $40,000 for yet another feasibility study on a skate park is quite frankly disturbing. What is absolutely gobsmacking is that it appears children are running the community by supporting the budget based on their support for a skate park, which adult ratepayers would be funding. This is an example of absurdity. Council are listening to the voices of children as opposed to 833 adult rate-paying residents. When are elected members going to stop spending other people's money? Of that 833 signatures, 700 of those are eligible to be voting in the next election. And perhaps that needs to be remembered and that their voices are being ignored. These elected members in this chamber who I believe are running again for either as councillors or as the mayor, perhaps need to remember they need to be supporting their residents. The lack of support to an overwhelming 833 residents' voices has been noted by this community, who have indicated to many of us they are fed up with this reckless spending of their money by elected members. We keep getting told it's only $40,000. With the sale of the pump track, it will be less. The question is, if this does not get up, residents will still be footing the $40,000 bill. Residents need a little bit more credit for their intelligence. Everyone knows if the feasibility study comes back as not suitable, the $40,000 is lost. Please listen to the community councillors, 833 voices of our residents who will be voting at the next election. Thank you.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to apologise. I'm shooting from the hip here, but when I was reading my agenda, I saw a different figure to the 833 who supported the skate park feasibility study. Is that correct?
Through the Mayor, Councillor Jennings, the 800 figure is referring to a previous petition that came...
No, but there was something in this agenda which I'm desperately trying to find that had a number in support of it.
Yeah, that was the 200 and something.
There was a gigantic shift of... so I apologise for this.
Through the Mayor, There is a couple of items. In the community consultation section of the council report, it does have the petition mentioned in there with the 833. That was not part of the official consultation that went out on the annual business plan and budget, but that petition is mentioned in the report. The numbers that you saw was from the engagement report, which is attachment 5, which is on page effectively 231.
Are you leading towards a question here, Councillor Jennings? Would you like me to come back? Or do you wish to speak? All right, then now Councillor Zing.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a question for Chris. In point 2, Councillor Davey hasn't noticed there was 6.95 rate rise. If this project is taken out, that means the rate will decrease by 0.5 or 0.6 roughly?
Through the Mayor, the resolution as shown on the screen doesn't propose a reduction in the rate increase. What would happen is that $40,000 would increase the surplus and be passed on to a debt reduction.
Councillor Cornish.
Just wondering, with the comments regarding financial prudence, can the administration tell us how many council member projects are in this annual business plan and the total value of the elected member projects?
Through the Mayor, I might have to take that on notice. We don't track the source of the budget bids once they're endorsed at the March council meeting. They become all part of the same calculation. So we'd need to go back to that report back in March and prepare that information for you.
A follow-up question, would you safely say that it would be more or less than $40,000?
Through the Mayor, I'd be confident it's more than 40,000 because there was a mixture of capital and operating projects.
Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
I'll speak to the motion. Thank you, Mayor. And I'd first like to confirm I don't have any elected member projects in the budget because I've actually listened to the CEO who says we're in a budget repair mode. We need to spend less money. So I can say with hand on heart, I have deliberately gone out of my way not to spend ratepayers' money. Now, this skate park proposal, the stupidity of it is the only result of this proposal will be that we will sell the pump track and then we won't have a pump track. And that's going to be a bad result because I bet you a pound to a penny or a penny to a pound that this feasibility study will come back and say this is not a feasible location for a skate park. And that will be $40,000 wasted because it's a road reserve. And every time you speak to the staff and say, oh, could we have a flower bed here, please? They'll say, road reserve services can't be done. There's electrical cabling under it. There's gas mains under it. There's water mains under it. There's stormwater mains. Oh, you could do it, but by the time you've ripped up all this stuff and redirected it and you've closed off Linden Avenue, it'll be $5 million. And then we'll hopefully we'll say, oh, that's too much. Now, given the current council, I'm not entirely confident about that, but God help us, maybe a sensible council will be elected by the time this...
Excuse me, councillor. I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think that's an appropriate
Well, it's a democracy, Mayor. I'm entitled to say that God help us, we might get better people elected to council.
You are
in the
also
future.
slandering this current
I'm not
council.
slandering anyone.
Councillor,
It's
all
not
right.
slandering.
Finish. Okay, finish this debate.
So what we're going to get is we're just wasting money, and all you get is we'll have no pump track, and you have a lot of sad little kiddies running around saying, we used to have a nice pump track that we could play on, and now it's been sold. To what effect? None.
Councillor Dawes.
A question to the administration, and I'm going back to what Mr. Cant had initially said, that we're not going to spend the $40,000 in total if the feasibility study says no, because there's a pause point. Can Mr. Cant again explain about how much we would spend to get to the stage of whether it's feasible or not, because then what follows is a concept design and then community consultation. So I'd just like to get approximately that figure, just so we have an answer for what Councillor Jones just said.
Through the Mayor, and I'm going off my recollection now, so it's going to be approximate. I believe that we have estimated approximately 10 to 12,000 for the feasibility study itself, a figure of 5 to 8,000 for the concept designs if council proceed to concept designs, and then a figure of up to 20,000 depending on the methodologies used for the consultation component of that.
Councillor Harvey, do you have a question?
I just have a question, thank you. The feasibility study is costing $40,000. Will the pump track be sold before the feasibility study or after the feasibility study?
Through the Mayor, if I recall correctly, the council resolution states that the pump track will be sold if this project is included within the approved budget, endorsed budget. We would have to determine how best to sell this asset, when would be the best time to do it, and the likely method of getting the best possible price for it. It would certainly happen in the next financial year or the same financial year. Whether it happens before or while we're doing the feasibility study, I'm not sure.
Councillor Davey, you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, you mentioned in describing, Barry, describing the feasibility study that there was a consultation process. Is that a community-wide consultation process? And does that happen as part of the feasibility study? It goes out to the community with the results before it comes back to council?
Through the Mayor, we've still to lock in the actual project plan itself. However, my understanding of how we would do that would be a consultant would look at all of the previous information provided, the council resolution, and then the infrastructure on site. And then they would look at the requirements or the opportunities and weaknesses of putting a wheel park on that site, and they would determine whether or not it's feasible or not. It may be feasible if, or it might be feasible, not be feasible because, and that information would be presented to council. At that stage, council would determine whether or not it would proceed to the next stage, which would be then develop a concept design and then go to consultation. You would only go to the consultation if council endorsed that this site is feasible and they wish to continue with that site, and then on the development of a concept design to council satisfaction to show the community what it would look like as part of a citywide consultation process.
Can I just follow up to clarify that? I think your answer to Councillor Dawes was that process, that initial process, was be about $12,000?
That's my recollection. Obviously, it would be subject to the market.
Thank you. Councillor Cornish.
Another question, if I can, to allay obviously some community concern. We've currently also got a policy that for any new capital, 50% needs to come from an external party. Is that correct? And that would apply to this if all of those hoops that you've just talked about in terms of the paperwork are met, and we come up with it, we've got a plan, we go out to consultation, the community go, yeah, this is a great idea, a great looking park, we then have to try and find 50% of the cost of the thing to install from an external party because of the policy position that this council set.
Through the Mayor, that's correct, Councillor Cornish. That is on page 48 with regarding level of debt and debt reduction strategy. Under 29D, any new capital expenditure, that's financed with a 15-year loan, but above at B, no new capital projects over 1 million without external funding support of at least 30%, and anything over 2.5 million must have 50% or offset by an asset disposal.
Thank you.
Councillor Davey, you have another question?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. I'm just a bit confused about if it was decided to progress, if the feasibility study was successful and it was decided that we would invest 2 million plus in installing a skate park, that wouldn't be considered in this budget, 25-26 budget, would it? So how's this relevant?
So, through the Mayor, so the 25-26 budget, if successful as it stands, like with the feasibility study, then we have 12 months to undertake and do that work. And then you have those gate points where the feasibility study, as Barry's mentioned, having a consultant saying, is it feasible, is it not feasible, comes back to the chamber, then goes out again if it's supported to do the next part regarding consultation. And if then you have a concept plan process, and then that's when you actually are looking for your financial year 26-27 to look for your capital investment for a project like that.
Councillor Jones?
Yeah, I've got a question, please. I recall reading recently that this site used to be a tram depot. So one, is that correct? And two, is council tested for site contamination?
Through the Mayor, I'm not aware, and no, we haven't. That would be part of the feasibility study.
I'm not aware of ever being a tram going up Greenhill Road. McGill Road, yes, the parade, yes, but never Greenhill Road.
I would have to take that on notice.
There may be a bus route, but there was no tram route. Anyway, that would be, if a feasibility study goes ahead, that would be part of that study. Now, I don't have anyone else on my screen, so I'm going back to Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for your contributions. I think it's patently obvious that we have a huge number of priorities for our spending. Our community and our ratepayers, we all acknowledge, are stretched, and we're trying to keep our costs down as far as possible. This project was added at a very late stage of the budget development process, and it has caused a lot of significant amount of angst and controversy since. The local residents got together and got 833 valid signatures in opposition. These are all the people who live in Hazelwood Park, around the area which will be affected, and further afield, and those who are very concerned about the environment of the area and the spending process and the likely costs. The recent consultation process identified 207 people in support of the feasibility study, but I think there is evidence, and it is shown in all of our consultation processes, that there is a huge, significant opposition to the investment of $40,000 to investigate the feasibility study. So my proposition tonight is we exclude that from the budget. We'll have a small saving which will go into other budget lines, and we forget about the skate park at this stage. We just cannot afford one, and I don't think a feasibility study is warranted. So I hope you'll support this motion and not support the feasibility study. Thank you.
All those in favour? Those against? Right, the motion is lost. Now I seek someone to move the original motion, or division's been called, so those who voted in favour, please stand. Councillors Harvey, Davey, Jones, Wilkins and Turnbull. Those against, Councillors Henschke, Cornish, Hallett, Zing, Hubel, Jennings and Dawes. Now we move on to the next item.
You'd still have to move the officers.
Sorry?
You'd still have to move the officers' recommendation.
Oh, yeah, I know, yeah. That's why I'd already actually asked that question before we were interrupted with a call for a division. So I'll ask again now. Councillor Cornish, you want to move the original motion?
Officer's recommendation, Your Worship,
Right,
yes.
thank you. It is seconded. Do you wish to speak now? I mean, you don't? Councillor Jennings?
Yes, I wish
seconding?
to second and acknowledge the staff's work. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who Councillor Jones wishes to speak?
Yes. Look, colleagues, it's ironic that Councillor Cornish has proposed this motion, given that 10 minutes ago he nailed the nail on the head, saying that this budget is chock-a-block full of unnecessary expenditure that we don't need to do this year. And so words fail me as to why Councillor Cornish has therefore proposed this motion. Because if you think this budget is full of stuff we don't need to do, why would you be proposing and voting for it? It makes little sense to me. What we should have done, and we started out quite well at saying, no, we're for the good of the community and the ratepayers, we're going to pull projects, but sadly the dam slipped, and of course what we've seen since we went through the budget process, people have been yet again sneaking in additional projects without going through the process, because it's only $20,000, only $40,000, only $50,000, until you're talking millions and millions of dollars. So, colleagues, please vote no. Let's give the ratepayers some relief. I know you won't. You know, we've already said we're not going to do any service reviews. We're just going to let the rates creep up inexorably, more and more spend. Look, soon enough, we'll hit a new record of the average rate in Burnside will be $3,000 a house, and the champagne corks will be cracking then, no doubt. Please say no.
Councillor Henschke?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Just going to speak to this motion. That wanted to highlight the 10-year debt reduction we have, 26 million to 5 million. The efficiencies, 500k saving, and for service reviews, looking at continuous improvement framework. So I welcome all of these initiatives of the administration under our new CEO's leadership. And the three themes we've got from the community now through this budget about infrastructure maintenance, upgrading, these are their concerns, and affordability and priorities. So, yeah, it's good to see that we are making a surplus in this budget and staying on track with our debt reduction strategy. Thank you.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll speak against this. I can't in all conscience vote and support for a budget that's got a lot of work done on it and a lot of planning and good work that's been done by the staff, but I just cannot support a spurious $40,000 feasibility study when it is just not feasible, as everybody knows, and there's no community support for it. So I won't be supporting this.
Councillor Hallett?
I have a comment. I really find some of the hypocrisy of members is quite offensive, and
I think I have to.
That?
Yeah, well, I did criticise Councillor Jones for making disparaging comments about the members. Okay. Not that it took any notice, he carried on anyway. However, I think I just need to give you the same potential warning that it's probably better to stick to facts rather than making comments about.
I'd like to remind members that since we've been elected, we've spent $110,100 on council member behaviour management issues. That's why I find that difficult, that when we come to then look at 40,000 to undertake a youth facility feasibility study, we don't know what that facility is going to look like. We don't know if any trees will be impacted. We don't know if there are any services that are under the ground that might prohibit the building of the facility. We don't know if it's going to include a road closure. We don't know until we conduct the feasibility study. That's all this is saying. Let's do a feasibility study. Given what we waste on legal fees for looking at behaviour management issues, I do not think this is reasonable to spend 40,000 on youth.
Councillor Dawes.
Yes, look, I think I will, I don't want to get upset here because I feel I would lose my train of thought. The first thing I want to say, I just want to correct Councillor Davey. She mentioned it 3 or 4 times. This was brought in at a late stage. It was brought in during the process for a budget. It wasn't brought in at the last moment, so I just want to correct that. I also just want to comment about what Councillor Harvey said, where she said, well, there's an election coming up, you know, you ought to vote with us, otherwise you... It was threatening to me. I'm sorry, that's not the way that we operate. We look at every potential issue, and don't shake your head at me, Councillor Harvey, and I sometimes support you and sometimes I don't. But there's no problem with me having a different view on some issues. This is not a nuclear plant in the middle of Burnside, for heaven's sake. I just don't understand why you're so much against it, no matter where it is, because some of your supporters have said to us, let's put it in Penfold Park, I saw, let's put it in Langman Reserve. So they are saying we should have one, but not in my backyard, and that's why we are having a feasibility study. The other thing that Mr. Kant said was it cost about 12,000 for the first stage. We sell the pump track for, let's say, 10. It's going to be 2, and you keep bringing out 40,000 all the time, and that is incorrect. That's an incorrect statement. This is the 4th time. The 4th time that we have discussed this since January, and every time it's been defeated. And I think, look, you can try, but it was quite obvious to me that it's something that we wanted to see what happens, because you have a very strong group against and you have a very strong group for. And so it's no good smiling as though you know everything, Councillor Harvey. Please.
Excuse me, but I have to ask you, what is the point of order? What are you referring to in the legislation?
Being accused of smiling.
You are smiling at me as though I don't know what I'm talking about.
That's not a point of order, but it is an issue. Let's settle down, both of you.
And that's why I don't want to get upset. Okay. The other thing, the last point I want to make is that last year, and this is all borrowed money, I voted against it, but we added an extra 910,000 to the cost of the Kensington Gardens club rooms. 910,000. I voted against it, Councillor Jones voted against it, my co-councillor voted against it, because they could have reduced the scope. That's not mentioned, 910,000. Then there's the Marrittville Village project of $4 million, which we haven't got any further because Norwood Payneham can't decide on the matter. These are major expenditure by this council that Councillor Jones keeps saying we mustn't do. And here we are talking about a net 2,000, and that's where I find it so difficult. I'm sorry I got upset, but when it's the 4th time we've discussed it, it makes it very difficult.
Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, it has become a nuclear plant in the middle of Burnside, hasn't it? Certainly in the middle of the chamber. That was unfortunate to witness. I too can't support this budget. It says 40,000, that's what we voted for, 40,000, and that's a sticking point for me for this Will Park. And I really think that some of the methods of getting this up have been a bit dodgy, getting children to vote, etc. I'm not with it, so I don't want to spend lots of money on legal fees either, Councillor Hallett, but it happens. We pay our own legal fees. It's the council who gets theirs paid, council people. So that's not really a good argument either. So I won't be voting for this budget either.
I just remind all councillors, not you particularly, Councillor Turnbull, but the use of the word vote. A consultation is not a vote. A consultation is asking the community to give their ideas and provide their feedback. It is not a vote. The vote comes at council election, as has been pointed out by Councillor Harvey earlier. Now, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question. I'd like it confirmed that I actually did say that the community had spoken to me about councillors rerunning, so it was not threatening. Is that correct? Did I say that? Because as far as I recall, I said that the community had told me that they were concerned about councillors that would be rerunning, so I'm sorry, but that is not threatening.
That's not a question, and it's not related to the debate.
No, it was a question. I did ask, did I say that?
It is not a question related to the debate.
Well, it is.
It is not. And I'm going to move on. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? If there's not, then I shall go back to Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Worship. Look, the annual business plan and budget for next year, we've spent a lot of time doing it. I don't need to rehash some of the comments some of the other councillors have brought up tonight. I will say that I have certainly, like Councillor Jones, have been not submitting elected member budget bids, specifically because we are in budget repair mode. So I have not been doing them as some other colleagues have, so trying to be responsible. But I understand that each area in our community is deserving to be listened to. And we've gone through a consultation process, and I thank the administration for the consultation process. It is still one of the best ones, I think, in metropolitan Adelaide that I've seen. Hearing that no one rocks up at meetings in other councils when they're looking at near 10% rate rises. No one comes. Yet we've got, hundreds and hundreds of people engaged with how their money should be spent. And I'm very thankful for the work that the council administration does in preparing our budgets and providing the guidance for this community. I don't know which way the feasibility study will go and come out, but it's knowledge. And I think potentially we'll gain more knowledge even if this site is a bad site. We'll gain knowledge of how small could a wheel park be, which might inform where a wheel park might go in other places. We do have 69 tennis courts. Could a wheel park actually fit exactly on a tennis court? I don't know, but this site is quite small. We might be able to find out a bit more information that might not relate to this site, but might relate to other sites, because previously, the previous feasibility study, which this council said after it came back, we said no, don't go further, was for an open greenfield site, grass, which we said you're not to touch grass anymore. So the proponents have come to the council and the councillor and said, I found a spot that's not touching grass. Can you go investigate it? I have no issues with us investigating it. I'm not invested one way or the other in this site. I'll wait for the feasibility like I did with every other feasibility, and I think we should all. It's not a guaranteed lock. I'm quite happy with the budget, and I really do thank the administration for all of the valuable work that they've put into it. So thank you.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Division's been called. Those who voted for, please stand. Those for, Councillor Henschke, Cornish, Hallett, Zing, Hubel, Jennings and Dawes. Those against, Councillor Turnbull, Wilkins, Jones, Davey and Harvey. Thank you. Motion is passed. So we now move to item number 11.2. Councillor Henschke, you withdrew it.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll move with the officer's recommendation, except...
I'll just interrupt.
Sorry,
It's
yep.
page, I should have said,
Yep.
page 289. It's a long way through. I'll give you the chance to start again.
Yeah,
Councillor
thank you very much. Okay. Firstly, just for expediency, I'd like to start with a question to the administration, please, through the Mayor. The question is... Well, I have to... Sorry.
Move the motion first,
Okay.
and then you can ask the question. I just double check.
Right. This recommendation, officer's recommendation, I'll foreshadow that I will make a variation, if necessary, after my question. It may not be necessary, but the motion as it stands may not need adjustment, if that makes sense. Okay, so the question to the administration is council item 3 there, authorises the CEO to finalise and submit with any necessary amendments the response to the Minister for Planning. That's in the attachment. Now, the question is, where it says with any necessary amendments, my question is, does that include consideration by the administration to consult, as per our policy for consultation, with the communities affected in the wards where this overlay will apply, a type of consultation where it's an informing consultation or a bit more than that, and at what stage that will happen. So is that all part of the nuances in this response to the Minister, if that makes sense? Thank you.
Through the Mayor, I might attempt a response. I am reading it as that if there were any amendments made during debate or a change, that basically what is approved will go, but if there were any amendments made by any council members tonight, that those amendments would be incorporated with the response.
Thank you for clarifying. So I will amend this, propose an amendment, and
someone else will have to move the variation. Right, because you've moved the motion. You can't move the variation as well.
Okay, so is it okay if I speak now, or I can speak now?
Yes, you have to speak now, because it's only the seconder who can withhold
Right,
the right
okay,
to speak.
thank you. Okay, so I'll speak now just to provide context. What we're getting at here is, as you can read, councillors, the state-led consultation showed mixed views. 48% supportive or supportive with concerns, and 50% unsupportive. We haven't got an overwhelming support for this co-design, co-located housing model. The Minister has taken on board the work of the administration and said that they will change details, there'll be a process to adjust and incorporate things. So it says there the remaining issues are considered to have only minor impacts. So, but nevertheless, here we are tonight, and if we move for this letter to go to the Minister as is, we're not giving a chance for our community to be aware of this happening. I feel that it's respectful that a level of consultation occurs with those specific communities, and whilst the state has done its consultation, I think we have a duty as well to engage with communities, because we will be changing their lives in these areas. It's effectively a zone change. So I'll wait to hear your response, and if someone wants to move a variation or amendment to the motion to add that consultation into part 3. So the letter from the CEO to the Minister for Planning says, thank you, but we want to talk to our people, raise awareness, give us that chance to add that piece to this project. Thank you.
Would you like to respond, please, Mr. Cant?
Through the Mayor, and I'll ask Alison to jump in after I give my initial response, if required. Council's been considering this for a period of time now, and you are correct that there has been a state-led community consultation, which we have been a part of, and the City of Burnside have had an opportunity to provide response in as well. What we've put to Council tonight is there's a time restriction on it. The actual deadline for the original submission was yesterday, or recently, and we've had an extension until tomorrow to enable Council to consider this. So we would not have time, as part of this process, to do further consultation, to then allow Council to choose to be a part of it. There's 2 options available if that's what you want to do. We can withdraw or decline to be part of it, and then undertake consultation and watch how the code amendment proceeds elsewhere. But if Council then choose to be part of it at that stage, Council may have to move its own code amendment at that stage to be part of it. I'm not sure entirely how that would work. Alternatively, we proceed in accordance with the officer's recommendation, and we do a full education consultation to those affected neighbourhoods with the explanation of how we have got to this position, what the administration's position, how it sits with the Council's policy, city master plan, etc. So I see those as your 2 options.
Councillor Wilkins, are you seconding the motion?
I want to seek a clarification and ask a question, so I can second it.
First of all, I need a seconder.
I'll second it.
So, and then you can ask your question.
Thank you. I'm happy to support the administration in this matter, because since the first, what did we do? We had a education over the computer. I've forgotten. Seems like 24 months ago. But being a person who lives in a historic area, and the historic area overlay comes into play here, I'm actually a bit concerned about any applications for this co-location in planning on a particular site be assessed by the officers individually and not just have an outcome which is the phrase deemed to satisfy. I want to ensure that every application in this particular co-located environment would be individually assessed and not just deemed to satisfy, because things could be just passed through and mistakes and not the best outcome might be achieved if we just choose to deem to satisfy every time.
Through the Mayor, as currently proposed by...
It's Alison, isn't it? Could you? I wonder if might like to introduce yourself,
sorry,
because some of us may not know your name properly or position.
Alison Cusack, Coordinator of City Policy and Planning. So thank you for the question. The government has finalised this policy. Assets currently finalised in the historic area. In the historic area overlay, it would co-located housing would take a performance assessed pathway. Full stop. In the areas of the established neighbourhood zone where the historic area overlay does not currently apply, it would also take a performance assessed pathway. However, subsequent applications a couple of years down the track for some particular land use types like
shed or what have you, might currently be able to follow a deemed to satisfy pathway, and that's the little tweak that we've put in the letter saying it might not be an immediate change that's necessary, but we'd like to see that change occur down the track to make sure that you don't get unforeseen development. Unforeseen developments we do not want. That we don't want in those parts of the established neighbourhood zone that aren't in the historic area overlay.
I'll happily second this motion. Councillor Davey. Thank you. I have a question first. I note on page 291 that there are some established neighbourhood zones where the historic area overlay does not apply currently in Beulah Park and Hazelwood Park. How do I add those to the list so that we get them to currently apply? Do I just need to make a variation to this tonight?
The recommendation that I think is before you at the moment recommends that the co-located housing overlay not be applied to the parts of the established neighbourhood zone that you're referring to because of the concerns we had on the deemed to satisfy pathway as it currently stands. Should you wish to have it applied to that and change the letter and the recommendation that we've made, there would need to be a change in the wording of the letter to that effect.
To add to that though, I think, and I'll take governance advice on that, I think that would be contrary to the motion that's in front of you, so this would need to fail and then that would need to be a new motion if that's the case.
Yeah, through the mayor, amendment is quite minor. That's quite a significant change. So if the council votes this down in support of what you've just said, then you can move that alternate motion afterwards.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question of the administration, if I can. Presuming, will we have some sort of level of education program for people available after whatever the state actually finally approves to actually roll out to instruct people and help people through the process if they are looking at a co-located housing project?
Through the mayor, I think that's very sensible and certainly something we will do. It's a complicated topic. We've been, as Councillor Wilkins has been mentioned earlier on, we've been talking about this for a significant period of time, and it is quite difficult to get your head around the specificities of the actual code amendment itself. So absolutely, we will we'll have a frequently asked questions and a did you know form that we'll share with all residents.
Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
I've got a question and a follow-up question, if I'm allowed. Anyway, the first question is, does the Minister need our endorsement to make the code amendment? Okay. My follow-up question is, if we send this response in, is this likely to appear in a bureaucratic document as Burnside partly endorsed the proposal? And they'll say, 2 councils endorsed and Burnside partly endorsed, so I'm going to pass it.
I'll look at through the mayor. I think if we are putting it very clearly, we've got a council report, we will have our letter, we will express our concerns around deemed to satisfy. We also know that we have a state government and a minister who's very keen to increase our proportion of dwellings in our city, and the preference is for us to guide it and shape it rather than it being done to us. So you know, this form of co-living is, I can't imagine will be for everyone, but there may be some people in our community who may feel that with generational living it might suit them or whatnot. So I don't think that we can be very clear, because we will have it documented what our view is, but I don't, would it be used politically? Who knows? I don't think there's much in it other than the Minister being able to say he's trying everything he can to increase the number of dwellings across the city and across the Greater Adelaide.
Councillor Davey?
Just a follow-up question, because I don't really understand now why these areas are included right in the middle of the mainstream. I mean, there's a whole area in Toorak Gardens, I imagine, and Rose Park, Beulah Park and Hazelwood Park. Can you clarify, please, what it actually means where there is no historic area overlay currently? Thank you.
Through the Mayor, the current extent of the historic area overlay has been the same for quite some number of years. I'm not sure which page number that you have. So this code amendment is not looking at changing the extent of the historic area overlay. That would stay the same. Where the established neighbourhood zone applies is also where the most of the historic area overlay also applies. There were certain parts of the established neighbourhood zone which didn't have the historic area overlay applied at the time of the transition to the planning and design code from the development plan. I believe it's my understanding that Council's position at the time was that it should have had the historic area overlay applied to all of the established neighbourhood zone. So that's where there's that little bit of differentiation. The Minister has requested us to provide agreement or not as to whether to apply the co-located housing overlay to all of the established neighbourhood zone in the City of Burnside, and our response is most of it, but just not those bits, because there's a few technical issues about applying it where the historic area overlay doesn't currently apply.
Now, I'm going to go back to Councillor Henschke to run the motion that she originally moved.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the administration for explaining nuances of all of this. It's planning is not necessarily done by the people half the time. You can see that this is certainly a planning job by the state government. It's interesting, and it was very interesting that the Minister held back on progressing with our development plan amendment for heritage areas like some parts of Dulwich that were meant to be protected back in the 80s, but for some reason weren't. Professor Liz Vines was shocked that those beautiful streets in Dulwich with the heritage homes with keyhole windows are not protected and could be demolished tomorrow. Now we have this co-living. Yes, you know, it will be very nice for someone to subdivide their backyard, strata title their big block, live in one part, have their ageing in place set up, their carer maybe living in the other bit, or strataing it and giving it to their children, all sorts of combinations and permutations. It's really a lot of slicing and dicing in the inner city zone, and I'm like Councillor Wilkins, you know, we're in the inner city zone with a heap of cut-through traffic, and the integrity and amenity of these inner city zones needs to be managed. Our city master plan is there. We hope our traffic precinct plans we're going to have the investment there to stop cut-through traffic. This is just going to increase activity. But nevertheless, we don't seem to have much more than we can do, and this is what we can do tonight. And so, as we'll have education consultation occurring, that's been clarified, I'm happy to move with the officer's recommendation.
Those in favour? Those against? The motion's carried. Division's been called, so would you please stand if you voted in favour or wish to vote in favour? Councillor Henschke, Cornish, Hallett, Zing, Hubel, Jennings, Wilkins, Dawes and Turnbull. Those against? Councillor Harvey, Councillor Davey and Councillor Jones. And the motion was carried. Now, I'd like to move to 11.3, Councillor Harvey, and then I'm going to suggest when we finish this debate, we have a break. Sorry, it's the Kensington Wamo Kensington Gardens Reserve Club Rooms, page 310. That's Councillor Harvey to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to acknowledge Council's efforts in open discussions with Michael Davies and Greg English from the Kensington Gardens Cricket and Burnside Rugby clubs. Their commitment to effectively work together with this club on the future of leasing and licensing and rent needs to be highlighted for a positive way forward, and it needs to be commended and acknowledged. This was guaranteed to all our clubs by our administration and perhaps misunderstood in last month's motion on notice. It was always Council's intention to sit down calmly and respectfully with our clubs for club consultation and to discuss a proposed positive way forward. I congratulate administration for all their hard work on this and also congratulate Michael Davies and Greg Clark from the Kensington Garden Cricket and Burnside Rugby clubs for their grasp of and understanding and professionalism and support on this way forward, supporting the rent on their new, exciting and modern club rebuild. They are a fine example of a club working together with council and their councillors. Administration have worked tirelessly for a rent recovery process to put back into the clubs with consultation, with understanding, with assistance. It was always Council's direction to work together with all our clubs. There are currently 8 neighbouring metropolitan clubs in councils with their clubs that pay rent, including Marion, Unley, Tea Tree Gully, Holdfast Bay, Charles Sturt, Mitcham and Walkerville. Thank you once again, and I hope you will support this motion.
I seek a seconder. Councillor Hallett, do you wish to speak?
No.
Right, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Turnbull.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I've got a couple of questions. Page 311. The use of the 3 Part C, use of the new facility by the broader community is to be maximised. And how will this be monitored?
Through the Mayor, we've based it on the revised policy that's currently out for consultation with the clubs and the wider community, and that has KPIs set into it that talks about maximising community use of the facility, and there'll be a reporting requirement of each of the clubs to present to the council on an annual basis.
I ask this question because when Tregenza Oval was redone up, that was my question about community involvement, and I was told bingo and Regis Burnside residents are going to go there. Well, I go there quite regularly for the community garden. I've never seen either. So I'm just wondering how it will be monitored. My second question, who's Part G? The clubs will be responsible for the ongoing maintenance. What exactly? Elaborate, please.
Through the Mayor, that's consistent with the current leasing and licensing policy, where the clubs will be responsible for the day-to-day operational maintenance, basically inside the facility.
So if the pipes clog up, who's responsible?
That's the clubs. Council will be responsible for any infrastructure requirements, but the maintenance and the day-to-day operations of the facility will be with the clubs.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question for Mr. Cant. On page 324, there is a house in red in the northeastern corner. I don't get it. Thank you.
Through the Mayor, I think that's just a house that's been clicked on when someone's connected onto the council's GIS system. So there's no relevance to the red dot. I can assure you it's not a house I've got my eye on.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple of questions. Following on from Councillor Turnbull's, in terms of maintenance of the facility and the surroundings, on page 319, it talks about the environmental sustainability, and this acknowledges the minimising waste, avoiding contamination, reducing energy and water wastage, and adopting sustainable procurement practices. What are these additional procurement practices? And also, how will the area around the site be maintained in terms of the grassed areas, the trees and any shrubs around it, in terms of the environmental ambience of the park that it's located in?
Through the Mayor, that will still be responsible of the council staff. The leased area will be for the building area only.
If there are no further questions or comments,
I just have
happy to... Oh, did you have another one, Councillor Davey?
Sorry, it's not quite clear. What are the sustainable procurement practices that they have to abide by, please?
Through the Mayor, that's taken directly from Council's draft lease and licensing policy, and that would be relevant to the particular building at the time when the lease is developed. We haven't at this stage developed the lease. However, the actual building itself, you'll recall, had to have appropriate environmental sustainability inclusions. So that's been considered significantly as part of the design in the new building.
One more further question. So what are they? Sorry. Does this mean that they're not allowed to use PFAS and nasty chemicals? Does it mean that they're not allowed to, I just don't understand what they are in terms of...
I'll have to take that on notice and provide that to you.
Right, Councillor Harvey, I'll go back to you to sum up now.
I'll just put it to the vote. Thank you.
All those in favour? Those against? Motion's carried. I'm suggesting that we now have a 10-minute break. It's 8:48, unless you're happy with that, councillors. All right, I've got an indication. No dissatisfaction. It's 8:48. We begin again at 2 minutes to 9. Sorry, we did vote, didn't we? Yeah, it was a unanimous vote. We did it already, Councillor Davey. Right, we're resuming the meeting now at 9 o'clock, and I've had a request from Councillor Davey that she wishes to make a statement. And that has to, of course, be approved by all councillors, so I need an indication from you if you are willing to allow her to make a statement. Right, we have sufficient number for that to go ahead. You can speak, Councillor. Can you turn your microphone off, please?
So do you want me to formalise that, Mayor, or request? I have requested that I be able to make a statement before the next item is heard.
That's already.
Oh, that's great. So I'm able to make my statement. I'm making a statement before I leave my seat in the council because I have a conflict on this matter. In relation to the complaint matter to be heard next agenda item, I wish to apologise to the Ombudsman and the City of Burnside for my error of judgment in mentioning the Ombudsman in relation to my frustration at the lack of appeal rights in my comments when I was contacted by the advertiser in November 2024. I have been misquoted by the media. I have not made misleading comments to them, have not breached the City of Burnside media policy, and believe that I have acted honestly at all times. The Director Corporate Recommendation 5, that I make a public apology at the 15th of July Ordinary Council meeting for my making comments to the advertiser in November 2024 is unreasonable. I have always maintained that I was misquoted, and I cannot apologise for these acts listed in the Director's summary. I am a diligent and committed Burnside councillor and believe that there is no quantitative nor qualitative evidence which demonstrates that I have not discharged my duties conscientiously, nor have acted in an unreasonable, unjust, disrespectful or discriminatory way by defending myself when making these comments in our democracy. Sadly, this council is indeed known as toxic, but we all acknowledge that we are trying to turn this around. I believe the behaviour management standards have been weaponised, are lacking in transparency, and because of this secrecy are able to be manipulated to be used to discriminate against council colleagues. I believe that this particular matter is vexatious and motivated by spite after someone associated with council briefed the media against me, and when contacted by them, I responded with comments to defend myself, as is my right. In this case, I have not seen the actual complaint allegedly made against me, and I do not know who made the complaint. I believe the matter could have been resolved informally without the significant waste of ratepayers' money for this investigation by a legal firm totalling over $30,000 at least. It is my observation that the current processes do not ensure natural justice and are not procedurally fair. Further, the Mayor's role in presiding over complaints at council could be seen as a material conflict of interest. It is my belief that this complaint is part of a relentless and antagonistic campaign to which I have been subjected for this entire council since vote counting day in November 2022, when I was assaulted by one of the Mayor's scrutineers. My health and welfare, both physically and psychologically, has been badly affected by this campaign. The behaviour management processes used at City of Burnside are very costly to our ratepayers, procedurally unfair, a denial of the basic provisions of natural justice, and are open to abuse by whomever runs the processes and are provided with all the legal resources to pursue their agenda. Councillors receive no legal or other support of any kind when faced with complaints such as these. I urge the Council to close the matter tonight and take no further action. Thank you for your time. And with my conflict of interest, I will now leave the chamber and I'll sit in the gallery, if I may. I declare a material conflict of interest and I will sit in the gallery. Thank you.
Through the Mayor, you're not meant to be in the same room. You're not meant to be able to hear the debate. So, but it's your choice what you do. But I'm highly recommending that you don't sit in the gallery.
Is there anyone else who wishes to declare a conflict of interest? Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. I wish to declare a general conflict of interest, and I will stay in the chamber for the debate and to vote. Thank you.
You're actually supposed to say why you have a general, because your name, yeah, go ahead.
I have a general conflict of interest because my name is in the report, and I don't
That's
have a
fine.
material conflict. Yep.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Right, now Councillor Jones, you moved this motion, or you withdrew this motion?
Yes, I have more terms of the motion. Here's a summary of the motion, colleagues. Number one is unchanged, that we receive the final investigation report. Number two, we take no further action against Councillor Davey on the basis that the Australian Constitution protects communication about government or political matters through the implied freedom of political communication. Legislation will offend against this freedom and therefore be unconstitutional and invalid if it imposes a disproportionate burden on the freedom of communication about government or political matters in its terms, operation or effect. I'll skip part B. It's about the conflict between Commonwealth and state legislation. C, the behavioural standards for council members to the extent that it purports to impose a disproportionate burden on the freedom of communication about government or political matters in its terms, operation or effect is unconstitutional and invalid. 4, notwithstanding that some may take issue with the report's findings that Councillor Davies' comments when she was contacted by the advertiser are in breach of the behavioural standard for council members, the question is moot, since Councillor Davies' comments were clearly communication about government or political matters and hence constitutionally protected free speech. Colleagues, when I went to bed on Wednesday, I was a free man. But when I woke up on Thursday and I saw the council agenda papers, it appears that I've entered the twilight zone and been transported to a dystopian alternate reality in which Burnside Council is attempting to tear up the ancient liberties of the English-speaking people. Colleagues, Australia is a democracy. Our constitution states that. And the High Court of Australia has repeatedly said that to be a democracy, there has to be a right to free speech. Now, as you may understand, governments from time to time get tetchy about ordinary people criticising them, and they try to pass legislation that restricts the right to free speech. And invariably what happens is that somebody big and wealthy enough to take on the government takes the law to the High Court, and the High Court chucks it out as being invalid and unconstitutional. And if somebody had the resources to take the behavioural standards for council members to the High Court, I have no doubt that they would be thrown out as unconstitutional and invalid. Unfortunately, of course, everybody knows that Councillor Davey does not have the millions of dollars required to take action in the High Court to have this legislation thrown out, so it is incumbent on us to stand up for what is right and end this ridiculous process now. Councillor Davey, you may not like what she has to say, but she has a right to say it. And to give you an analogy, colleagues, imagine that the newly elected Albanese government used its numbers in Parliament to say we're passing a law that says opposition MPs are not allowed to criticise the government. There would be an uproar. Everybody in Australia would say that is completely outrageous, and in no time at all, media organisations and wealthy libertarian people would have an action in the High Court and the new law would be thrown out. Well, this law needs to be thrown out because it totally restricts Councillor Davey, and not just Councillor Davey, my right, your right to say things that are critical of government. And I know yesterday in Daly, Mayor Bria of Norwood said broadly the same things, that the mayors, whenever they get together, complain that councils are toxic and that something needs to be done about it. And yet here we are prosecuting Councillor Davey for saying exactly the same thing. If you vote against Councillor Davey today, I hope you put a code of conduct in on Mayor Bria tomorrow.
Thank you. Right, do I have a seconder? Sorry, do I have a seconder? Councillor Jones, could you turn your mic off, please? And then I think it's Councillor Turnbull who's second.
I'm seconding it, but I reserve my right to speak.
Councillor Harvey, you wish to speak?
I have a couple of questions, thank you. Where is the complaint?
Through the Mayor, the complaint is held by the responsible person, and then they summarise the complaint and put that towards Councillor Davey.
And who is the responsible person?
For this matter, the responsible person is the Mayor.
And who is the complainant?
That has been de-identified as requested by the complainant.
Why?
They have the right under the policy. The behavioural management policy does state that if there is compelling reasons as to why, then they're able to do so.
How are we supposed to vote on something that we can't see?
Should a council member wish to have the complaint tabled, then they're welcome to do so, as they did back in January.
Councillor Turnbull, you wish to speak?
2 questions, please. Number 1 question is, why were the 2 complaints bundled together? They're quite separate.
Through the Mayor, that would have to be a question to the complainant.
Well, I don't know who the complainant is, so I can't ask them. Oh, how weak. And my second one is the complaint 2 is to do with Councillor Henschke. Why didn't she initiate her own complaint?
Can you repeat that last question? Sorry, unfortunately, I couldn't hear that last question. And through the Mayor, can I assume that's rhetorical?
I think I understand where the reason is that the first complaint was handled initially and there was an outcome. Then there was another complaint that came in that related to the report in the Advertiser, so that was a subsequent event that caused a complaint.
Sounds very messy to me.
It was actually quite logical. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying it was logical in terms of the order that they came. Now, Councillor Harvey, you have another question?
Thank you, Mayor. As you are the responsible person, don't you have a conflict of interest?
No, I don't, because I didn't do the investigation at all. The investigation was handed on to a completely independent legal firm, Minter Ellison.
Thank you.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I need something clarified. Why shouldn't this be looked at under the Ombudsman Act of 1972, not us in the chamber, or could it go there next?
Through the Mayor, for complaints to the Ombudsman, that can be done by any one person, but it's not a matter for council to refer things to the Ombudsman.
Can I just ask a question of the CEO in relation to the statements that were made in this motion about the Australian Constitution, please?
Thank you, Mayor. We're not, unlike the United States of America, we don't have a Bill of Rights. So while we do have free speech, it doesn't mean a person can engage in free speech regardless of the law. And so, for an example, the behavioural standards for council members is a legislative instrument which is made under the statutory force of 75E, required to comply with that instrument. So you can't simply contravene the behaviour standards and say that you're exercising your right to speak, to free speech, because that would not stand. Well, that is the legal advice we have, Councillor Jones, even though you may not agree with that. That is the advice we have.
Now, Councillor Hallett.
Just in regard to this recommendation, the version of the recommendation that Councillor Harvey-Jones has put up, I'm just reading at the moment saying, and I just want to make a comment, and this says, while freedom of speech is not explicitly stated as a right in the Australian Constitution, the High Court has recognised an implied freedom of political communication. It then goes on to talk about what the High Court has interpreted the Constitution's provisions on representative government to mean that there is implied freedom for citizens to discuss political matters. It's not absolute. This implied freedom is not unlimited. It is subject to restrictions, including laws relating to defamation, hate speech, incitement to violence, so on. So therefore I won't be supporting that recommendation.
Is there anyone else? Councillor Harvey, you have another question?
No, I'd like to speak, thank you. This is really disappointing that this chamber has to continue down this nasty, treacherous, toxic path with this complaint. I feel disappointed that council are perpetuating this bullying behaviour with this complaint. In the nature of conciliation and making council work together respectfully, council engaged psychologists no less at a cost to ratepayers of $60,000 for a respectful way forward for all elected members. For the sake of everyone's health, well-being and psychosocial safety, just when is this going to stop? The media have called Burnside Council toxic. That is apparently not a secret. Clearly, this council needs to lift its game, but when? With constant bickering, hatred and complaints, I ask again, when is this going to stop? Already this respectful way forward has been broken with this malicious complaint against Councillor Davey. Another vicious, vexatious witch hunt and attack against Councillor Davey for telling the truth. What has become of this council? As I said, this council has spent oodles of money for a way forward. This is a badge of honour that the Burnside Council cannot afford. We need to move away from harmful, coercive bullying and vicious and undermining behaviour as we have seen in this complaint. There is no due diligence, leaving some of us traumatised and betrayed from a complaint system that clearly is not working to protect us from a malicious and toxic environment. Currently, as Mayor Monceau stated, she handled the complaints and handles all complaints. All complaints must go off-site. A toxic culture is a culture in which conflict is common and work environment negative because of unethical behaviours, lack of inclusion and disrespect. Councillor Davey did not breach the media policy but spoke the truth. Where is the complaint in all of this? We don't get to see it, hiding behind anonymity and the Mayor's skirt. Why should Councillor Davey be forced to sign an agreement not knowing the complaint or the complainant? Where is the evidence of Councillor Davey bullying this anonymous person? Bronwyn Lewis, the South Australian State President of the Australian Local Government Women's Association, calls for a clean-up of council behavioural culture, stop the bullying and manage poor standards of behaviour now, as in her article in the letter to the editor. I say bravo, finally somebody exposing this culture in councils.
Can you turn your mic off, please? Councillor Harvey, can you turn your mic off, please?
I'm not going to support the motion that's up in front of me. I'm going to go with, let's just go with what is recommended and we can keep moving forward. Like we've got something coming up and it's all interconnected. And after we have addressed it, then we can move forward. When we first started here, it was supposed to be what happens in the chamber. We can be a bit, we can get grumpy, we can disagree, but when it starts winding up on emails and possibly leaking stuff to media, and what's even worse is maybe leaking stuff to the media that is not true, or how they have perceived, how they have.
It's not a point of order unless you can explain.
Stuff to the media, Councillor Jennings.
I am just saying it.
Interrupt, please, and let him finish. You've spoken without interruption.
It just.
It is not a point of order.
It is.
Please carry on.
Oh, sorry. It just seems that. It's being weaponised. We're supposed to be in here in the chamber working together for our community. If you start singling out somebody, how is that good for the community? Like what? So let's just move forward with the recommendation from the Director Corporate. And then we can get on with 15 point something or other later on. And then we can move forward. Like we can't just sweep this under the rug. Thank you.
Just want to clarify, and I'll ask it as a question, but one of the problems with all of these things is these complaints take an awful long time to be investigated. And can I just clarify this? Correct me if I'm wrong, this secondary complaint that rose this investigation came in before the ethos report or before there was the ethos investigation, did it not?
Through the Mayor, yes, this came before. This is about news articles that happened at the beginning of November, where the ethos, last year, where the ethos process kicked off from January.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Dawes.
Yes, I'd just like to make a couple of comments. I'm always aware of Councillor Jones' views on the Australian Constitution. I think he stated it quite a few times over the last 6.5 years. But we're not a constitutional court as such, so I can't support the way that he has, how he's worded the particular motion. What I would like to say is that the report has been prepared by Susie Arnett who is a very prominent special counsel from Minton Ellison. And when you have a report which is quite detailed and gives the opportunity for both sides to give their view, then I will listen to that and I will read it very, very carefully. And you know, when that legal report is so strong, I just have to support it.
Councillor Cornish?
Similar to Councillor Dawes, I've got grave concerns about including the Australian Constitution in a motion when we don't have proper knowledge from a legal expert in the room to back up all of those claims, especially if we're hitting the highest document in this land. What I will probably say is that I certainly found reading this report that it did pick up a number of issues, and I completely concur with some of the statements made in this chamber that the behavioural standards code and the policy are probably not working for the whole of South Australian local governments right now. I would definitely say as well that some failings of our media policy have definitely been sort of highlighted during this process, and I'm glad that there's an amendment to it, to the media policy in the officer's original motion. It's been something that probably has been bugging me for my time in this chamber, where I am fearful to go and speak to the media as a councillor, because I'm not representing the entire council when I speak to the media. I no comment every time they call me on the phone, which I've got to say never happens anymore because they got sick and tired of my no comments early on. But I've got to say that there needs to be a better balance, I think, with comments. I think every comment by a councillor should be their personal. I almost think it should be the other way around, where the councillor should say, I've got the authority to speak for the entire council on this topic, and then do it. But if that's not done, because we cannot guarantee that a reporter is actually going to say, speaking in their personal capacity in any time. An editor's always going to remove it. It's never going to happen. So I do think that it's highlighted an issue with our media policy. I'm glad that we're tidying it up. I don't think it's perfect yet, but I'm happy that it's going in the right direction. I think we can do a bit more work on it and probably get a bit more feel about what we should actually be able to do and what we are not able to do, and get councillors out there saying some things sometimes, because I do feel that in local government land it is only mayors, and maybe that might not be such a great thing for the local community, that they're not hearing their local councillors on a regular basis. But I cannot support the motion because of all of the Constitution stuff in there. Yeah, I'll leave it at that since it's my time up. Thanks.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? I will go back then to Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, colleagues, the good news is, contrary to what the CEO says, we do have a Bill of Rights in Australia because we inherited the Bill of Rights 1689 when South Australia was established. And the fact is, the High Court of Australia, Australian Capital Television Proprietary Limited and Commonwealth 1992, Nationwide News Proprietary Limited and Wills 1992, Longy and Australian Broadcasting Corporation 1997 has repeatedly upheld the right to freedom of political communication and struck down state and Commonwealth laws that offend our rights that we should be defending. Now, yes, there are limits to this freedom, as Councillor Hallett has said, but Councillor Davies' comments were not hate speech. Councillor Davies' comments were not defamation, because you can be pretty certain that if they were defamatory, the advertiser wouldn't have published them because they would be sued. And I don't see whoever thinks they might have been defamed driving around in a Maserati. So, colleagues, let us take a stand. This is defending us as well as defending Councillor Davey. She's been very badly treated in this. We need to stand up for our rights. I suspect this won't end here because the last motion ended up on Sky News and was discussed there, and there'll be lots of influential libertarians watch Sky News. Let's hope they take up this battle on Councillor Davey's behalf and behalf of all Australians who want to live free from outrageous government interference.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Division's been called. All those people who voted in favour, please stand. Councillor Turnbull, Councillor Wilkins, Councillor Jones and Councillor Harvey. Those against? Councillor Henschke, Councillor Cornish, Councillor Hallett, Councillor Hubel, Councillor Jennings and Councillor Dawes. The motion was lost. Now I seek someone to move the original motion. Councillor Hallett.
Yes, I move that.
You're moving the original.
And I move that it be put. We've talked.
Sorry?
And I move that it be put.
No, you can't do that, but you
All right.
can move.
I move the motion.
Because we haven't even got a seconder yet, so we can't do that. Okay, so if you've moved it and Councillor Jennings, you're seconding it. Do you wish to speak? And are you going to speak? No? All right. Councillor Jones, you wish to speak?
I have a question.
All right. Councillor Hallett, can you just turn your mic off, please?
Page 389, point 4. Councillor Davey was placed on notice. Councillor Davey was placed on notice about repeated misbehaviour. Now, as far as I can tell, she was placed on notice on 28th of January 2025, and this complaint dates to, or the offence, alleged offence dates to 1st and 2nd of November 2024. So can someone explain to me how you can be placed on notice about something that you'd already done and hence be found to have committed repeat behaviour?
Through the Mayor, through the first complaint, the final investigation report had been completed, which involved, through the responsible person, putting Councillor Davey on notice. There was a period of time that there was an effort to get agreement on the actions that came out of the final investigation report. That period of time took a while, and ultimately the agreed actions were not agreed to. So the recommendations weren't agreed to by Councillor Davey, which then resulted in this eventually getting to a public meeting of council, which is why it was on January 2025.
Councillor Turnbull? Oh, all right then. Sorry, you've dropped down the list. You're at the bottom of the list. No, you'll have to go. Councillor Turnbull's at the top of the list.
You can go, Harvey. Okay. Right. When I first read of this complaint against Councillor Davey, I immediately thought of the term witch hunt, but as it seemed to be excessive, I will not apply it now. But I will say that in my view, Councillor Davey is being unfairly and overly persecuted here. Excuse me. I accept that Councillor Davey's alleged statement to the press about her view of the toxic culture within Burnside Council can be construed as being damaging to the public image of the council. But as in her statement, she's adamant she was misquoted by the media. So I personally didn't interpret this as being a hanging offence or a behavioural issue. But what I'm really unhappy about is the specious nature of the other elements of the report and both the financial and human costs of these. These so-called allegations seem to be very flimsily based, such as Councillor Davey saying to Councillor Henschke that she didn't know what her problem was, or similar to that. This presents as a simple statement of her position, and I cannot begin to understand how this statement is now being presented somehow as a breach of behavioural standards. That is so far-fetched as to defy any logic, as is the very repetitive content of the rest of the legal report. And Council is paying for this padded nonsense. Councillor Davey has declined to sign an agreement. I wouldn't either, having read the terms as set out. such a draconian vindictive piece of work. One being will be reported for non-compliance. By whom? To whom? More in line with a certain era in German history, I think. Given our current council financial restraints, I remain absolutely dismayed at the frivolous waste of council resources that are being deployed on these matters. My information is that council's legal fees on this particular matter are already exceeding the 22,000, as quoted in the report, and still growing. And this figure does not include a perhaps equivalent cost of Council of Burnside staff, resources, time in dealing with this. And all to achieve what? We've made a lawyer's picnic indeed. It is well beyond time that as a council we moved on from these personal agendas and got on with our core business of governing our council and its issues. But for this we need some leadership, please. Why was there no attempt at mediation? I, for one, am having a difficult time explaining all this to concerned residents who think that council needs to be careful with their spending money, as they have to be in this current financial crisis time. Thank you.
Councillor Jones. Councillor Turnbull, can you turn your mic off, please?
Yes, I have a follow-up question, please. Look, I may be a bit thick, but you keep referring to agreed actions that weren't agreed upon. So how is an action agreed if it's not agreed? I don't understand. Can you explain?
Through the Mayor, thank you for the question. To clarify, it's under the policy, there's meant to be an agreement to the actions if they can agree to it. So the document term was the agreed actions document, and that's what was disagreed to.
Thank you, Mayor. Page 389, number 4. What are the so-called repeated misbehaviours that Councillor Davey has committed with respect to Councillor Henschke?
Through the Mayor, that's in the final investigation report.
Councillor Cornish.
Yeah, I've just got a few comments, I suppose, to make. This chamber actually even asked for us to change our processes so that a lot more of these went to the legal firms, and Councillor Turnbull, that came from you. So the legal costs associated with this are just like, we all made that decision that we were going to use lawyers a lot more in these processes because we didn't trust anyone around this table to make those calls. I'd also like to say that I'm pretty certain in some instances mediation is usually offered. I certainly received a complaint because I used the word petty in an email, and 2 members complained against me, but I decided to make a formal apology to the whole of council for using the word petty in an email. So I would just like to say that you've got the ability to apologise before it ratchets up the line and becomes a huge legal issue. On the flip side, I really don't know why I would be getting legal representation. This is a behavioural matter. It's a slap on the wrist at best. Why am I getting a lawyer to represent me? I don't understand why we've gone so high in this process. It is a behavioural issue. So I've got some fundamental issues with some of the things that have been said. I think the work has been done. Even Councillor Davey thanked the lawyer involved and the process that was involved through a recent email that we were lucky to be copied into. But I just don't, some of the statements don't sit well to me, that, you know, mediation, why wasn't that explored? It is the process at the early parts, both parties. You've got the ability to come out of it. We've gone and removed, because we don't trust each other on the responsible persons, we've removed a whole section, and stuff is going to the lawyers at a much faster rate, and is going to cost this council and our ratepayers a lot more money. But that was at the behest of us in this chamber. It is a terrible, terrible behavioural process. Don't get me wrong. They all have, ever since the first one came in. Like back in 2010, it's been terrible. And it has not got right. And I think we definitely need to do something, but at a council level, it's not the way to do it. You have to do it at the state government level. This entire section of the Act was brought in by the former government, and that was based on concerns raised again in this chamber from behaviour in this chamber. So we are dealing with a lot of issues here, and we're not the authority. Our parent is, which is the state government. You know, we're the kids in this game, and it's a behavioural issue. But I just had to make those statements. I'm sorry.
Councillor Jones.
Well, I'd go back to my question. So, noting that we've agreed that the so-called agreed actions are nothing of the sort, I have to ask, on what authority did the Mayor place... I can't see how you can say Councillor Davey was placed on notice when the Mayor couldn't place her on notice because there were no agreed actions, and therefore the only time Councillor Davey was placed on notice was on the 28th of January 2025, which is 2.5 months after the alleged offence. So this is contrary to natural justice, isn't it? I have a follow-up question, but I might ask that later.
Through the Mayor, that was the recommendation at the time. And to clarify, it was the recommendation at the time that the final report was shared with them.
Councillor Harvey.
I have another question, thank you. Was mediation declined?
I think what we're dealing with two different issues here. We're supposed to be today focusing on the second complaint. The first complaint, mediation was offered, not on this one. Councillor Jones.
This is my next question. If, as you say, the Mayor placed Councillor Davey on notice about repeated misbehaviour, doesn't that mean she now has a conflict of interest about this matter?
Through the Mayor, this was a recommendation that came from the independent investigator, and so this was in the final report, and this was shared with Councillor Davey.
Councillor Turnbull.
My next question is, why wasn't mediation offered on the second complaint? You said it wasn't offered. Why not?
Because there was a third party involved.
Through the Mayor, my understanding is the de-identified complainant had a fear of victimization.
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, so following up on my questions, now we've discovered it wasn't the Mayor who placed Councillor Davey on notice, it was the independent investigator. So what is the legal power of the independent investigator to place Councillor Davey on notice of anything?
Through the Mayor, I have to be a little bit careful with my wording because there was another confidential aspect to this. However, responding directly to that, the final investigation report for BMC 001 was provided to Councillor Davey and the parties involved back in November, so or back before that. So it comes down to what Councillor Davey ought to have known was going to be the recommendation, one way or the other, through the Mayor or through Council, of then what happened with her subsequent behaviour.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. Just another question. So there appears to be two people in two complainants. Is that correct?
To insinuate the number of complainants based on the fact that there's de-identification.
Councillor Jones.
So to clarify, so my understanding is that, that Councillor Davey could have had a reasonable view. She refused to sign the not agreed actions because she didn't agree with them, and she said, well, I'm going to take it to Council. And you can't say you've been, and Council might very well have chucked out the charges and said, no, this is total nonsense, we're not wasting any more time with this. So I don't really see how you can say you've placed someone on notice before they have been legally placed on notice. It makes no sense.
Through the Mayor, it's a bit more complex than that because there was another process that was also, that I can't get into, but there's another process as well that occurred, which some of the statements made were related to that.
Councillor Hallett.
Am I able to move that we put the motion? Because I just think we're bringing council into further disrepute by these concepts. Let's just do it.
You can't speak again because you've already spoken before. Okay. All right, next person is Councillor Jones again.
Would you agree that in taking a decision, I am trying to take a decision based on the report that you have presented, and I'm not privy to confidential knowledge that's not in the report? So, based on what has been written, would you agree that Councillor Davey was placed on notice after she committed the offence, alleged offence?
Through the Mayor, at the end of the day, Councillor Davey was aware at the time that the final investigation report for the first offence determined an outcome that she was found to have breached it.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor. So was Councillor Davey being required to sign something under duress to something she did not believe in, with no complaint and no complainant identified?
Through the Mayor, there's no, under the behavioural management policy, you are not compelled to sign the document. If you prefer that it goes to council, then that is your option.
Councillor Jennings.
I move that the motion be put. I can't.
You've already spoken, so you can't. Councillor Turnbull, you're next.
Yes, I have one question, the last question. The part about mediation concerns me. Is it true that the councillors involved should have sat down with the Mayor in the Mayor's parlour and sorted it all out over a cup of tea and a slice of Neapolitan cake, as Mike Smithson said when he was reporting in the In Daily? Like grown-ups. Would have been much better.
Through the Mayor, Councillor Turnbull, I would hope that as elected members and council members that we would not have to get to this stage, and if we could go through mediation, whether it could be agreeing to disagree in the chamber, and the relationships were much better than what they are. But unfortunately we're not in that position, and therefore that is why we are in the position we are in.
Councillor Jones.
Yes, I've got a question. Sorry, I've got a question, please. Councillor Breer, in his article...
It's Mayor Breer.
Sorry, Mayor Breer, writes in his article, having watched fellow mayors become distressed and in tears as they talk about the lack of respect and toxic atmosphere at council meetings. Is that statement a breach of the behavioural standards in that it does not generate community trust and confidence in council?
In Mayor Breer's column that he wrote, there is no reference to any council in that at all. He writes as the Mayor of the City of Kensington, Norwood and Payneham and St Peters. He does not write it, and he does not specify any particular council. He has heard mayors at mayors' forums, as he states in his letter, tell from across the state, tell of the problems.
So it's okay to not generate community trust and confidence in councils in general?
It's got nothing to do with
just
Burnside
not a
Council.
specific council.
Okay, you do it.
Through the Mayor, if some of the councillors or if a community member did find that, or they could put a complaint in, and that would be go through a process whether to see whether he had. But I think the comments made by Mayor Breer doesn't have a specific material impact on what the council members have been asked to consider.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? If not, then I'm now... No, Councillor Jones.
No, I think I might speak against the motion, actually. Look, I am incredulous. This is Orwellian. Her remarks did not generate community trust and confidence in the council. I've got to tell you, colleagues, I'm stuffed. Because practically every meeting, I say we're spending too much money and borrowing too much money. So I'm going to be up before the judge in no time at all. In fact, it's a wonder I'm still here after 6.5 years. But that's democracy. I'm allowed to say the council's spending too much money and we're in too much debt. And I defy you to make a code of conduct, because I will go to the High Court and we'll get this settled one way or another. I will not be bullied. I will not be treated like a bug the way that Councillor Davey has been treated, with her wings torn off and tortured. It's totally outrageous. And as for this point 4, the Councillor Davey has been put on notice about something she did 3 months before putting on notice. It is Kafkaesque in its nonsenseness. And finally, that's not even a word. It's one I've just made up. And Councillor Cornish says, why did Councillor get get a lawyer? Well, perhaps because she feared and distrusted the government. She was a little person, and she's up against the full weight of the government with unlimited resources to hire the best lawyers in Adelaide to prosecute her, to go through everything she said and nitpick and say, well, that breaches clause 7A. You're for the high jump. No wonder she's got a lawyer. That's why our policy actually provides for reimbursement for people who go through this process, and we find in their favour. But as it is, the process is totally biased and one-sided, and God help you if you ever have to go through it. So please vote against this motion.
Councillor Harvey's got a name up again.
I'd like to speak, thank you. Who would sign a document under duress, not knowing who the complainant is, what the complaint is? Once again, cloak and dagger style, the Burnside way. Not one person in this room would sign it. If you were in the same position, I guarantee you would not be signing something you knew nothing about, not the complainant, not the actual complaint. And I'm pleased to say that Councillor Davey has had the guts to stand up to this and not sign something that she did not believe in. So well done to her. But she has exposed the level of toxicity that befalls many councils in this state through a very unfair complaint process that is completely broken.
Councillor Hallett, would you like to speak again to sum up? Otherwise, I'll put the motion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Excuse me. No, I have the Mayor's activity report to speak.
We're leaving. We can come back to that if we get through the confidential. The Mayor's activity report can wait till next time if necessary, if we don't make the report. We do have a deadline on these two, so that's why we need to discuss these. Sorry? You told her? Okay. All right, so we're now in confidential mode. Everyone who's gone who's got to go and...
We need to move to...
Sorry? We've got to move into confidence, yes. Oh, okay, I was using machine. Right, Councillor Jennings, move to go into confidence. Councillor Wilkins, seconding. All those in favour? Everyone except Councillor Jones.
Petition.
Oh, come on. For goodness sake, Councillor Jones, you're wasting such time. Councillor Henschke, Councillor Cornish, Councillor Hallett, Councillor Hubel, Councillor Jennings, Councillor